Move back to committee. Councillor, anyone? Seconded by Councillor Humphreys. Do you vote on that? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Okay, so we will be moving then to item 14. The Heritage Advisory Committee meeting minutes of February 8th, 2016. That item was pulled by Mayor Daw.
Well, I'll move the staff recommendation as it is, but I've got some comments.
Is there a seconder? Mayor Daw has moved the committee's recommendation as it is there. Is there a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Gartner. Okay. Mayor Daw.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just moving it to get it on the floor because I don't really support it.
Thank you.
And specifically with respect to 41 Metcalf. On page 3 of the report, 123 of the continuous agenda, in the second paragraph, the last part of that paragraph, and this is through you, I guess, to Mr. Ramuno, it says, the committee inquired about the condition of the foundation and staff, staff indicated the evaluation working group only considers historical, architectural, and environmental aspects of the property. Now, this is from the meeting of February the 8th. Obviously, after that, because the Quail engineering report is, they visited the house at 41 Metcalf on 2 dates, one on the 11th and one on the 24th. So what would be the process now? Having had the joy of a log structure and infestation of carpenter ants, I can appreciate the issue that the residents are facing. So what would be the process now through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Ramuno with respect to this engineering report? What would be staff's position or the committee's position at this point?
Mr. Ramuno.
So you, Mr. Chair, Mayor Daw is correct. I mean, when staff prepared the report for the Heritage Committee February 8th, we didn't have the engineering information available to us or a heritage impact assessment. The applicants did mention at the Heritage meeting of February 8th that they had some concerns with the structure of the dwelling. Based on our evaluation, I mean, we essentially do a physical review of the building and based on any information that's provided to us. To the mayor's question, I mean, I think the council or the committee has a couple of options. I mean, they can deal with the matter this evening, or they could refer this information back to staff and perhaps even back to the Heritage Committee for a further review of the applicant submission and for consideration to the Heritage Committee, which would then come back to General Committee and Council for final disposition, or again, Council could render a decision on the applicant's request this evening and next week at Council.
Mayor Daw.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Ramuno again. Excuse me, what would be the timing on that? How much more time would this take for it to go back to the Heritage Advisory Committee for them to look at it and come back to us? Are we talking a month, 2 months?
Mr. Ramuno.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we do have a Heritage Committee meeting. Well, we have one March 7th. So we can do our best to try and bring something forward to that meeting next Monday.
It's
a little out of order, but if looking towards the applicants, is a 1 month delay unnecessarily?
Okay, thank you, Thank you, Mayor Daw.
If we can do this in 1 month, I'd be okay with referring this back. If it can't be, then I will vote against the recommendation and vote to remove it from the list.
Mr. Ramuno, is it possible to get this wrapped up in a month or not?
To you, Mr. Chair, I think we could, even if we provide the information directly to Heritage Committee next week as a walk-on. And then we'll try and turn that around to the next GC council cycle later on this month, end of March.
Thank you,
It's
Mr.
doable.
Ramuno. Mayor Dow, is that okay with you? Thank you. 7th of March, it's Monday. Mr. Clerk, could you comment?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, my understanding is that the Heritage Advisory Committee meeting is on Monday. The final disposition of this matter by council won't be until Tuesday, so it'd be a little problematic. Yeah.
Next cycle. It's going to bring it back next cycle.
I realize that, but councils won't make a final decision on this item until after the Heritage meets on 7 on committee's recommendation already.
So essentially, you're saying it's not possible to refer this to the Heritage Committee from General Committee? Mr. Clerk?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. General Committee has no authority to refer. However, I just came up with a suggestion. Staff could walk on additional items and supplement the recommendation to council on Tuesday night arising from that committee. But we can't specifically refer this item to Heritage because that referral won't happen until after Heritage meets on the 7th.
But I would suggest that staff have just understood that and it's duly noted. Mayor Dahl, are you complete? Do you have one more question?
Is Mr. Ramuno clear on the direction?
Are you clear on that, Mr. Ramuno?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Clerk, do you have an additional comment?
In view of that, it would be my recommendation at this time that the committee, General Committee merely defeat the Heritage Committee's recommendation, just receive the minutes, and we can deal with this more fully at council next week.
So I have, thank you, Mr. Clerk. I have Councillor Humphrey and then Councillor Abel. Councillor Humphreys.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that. We should do that for sure. Just a couple of concerns. As Councillor Abel and I have been on the Heritage Committee before, and I know that we've done. It says the committee inquired about the condition foundation and staff indicated the evaluation group only considers historical, architectural, and environmental aspects of the property. But I do know that we actually do site visits if there's any concerns about the building, and I know we did that almost for each and every one that we reviewed, that we were concerned with demolition, and there was an impact absolutely on that. And we call in the experts, we call in, a couple of our honorary members to help us get there where we need to go. It's a tough decision to make, but we certainly, seeing the evidence of this on residents, sometimes it's just impossible, depending on the magnitude of the demolition or the deterioration of the building. So I'd love for this to go back and have a site visit done of the committee if possible, and then everyone gets to see what we're talking about and bring it back to council, and I think we'll all be in a better position to make a decision.
Thank you, Councillor Humphreys. Though I would suggest that organizing a site visit for Monday might be problematic for members of the committee.
Before Monday.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Humphreys. I have Councillor Abel next.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, is there a demolition request in so far?
Mr. Ramuno?
To you, Mr. Chair, no, the applicant hasn't submitted a demo request. The request was to remove it from the registrar, from the list.
But I see in the plan that was often we had a demolition request and then we had a time constraint for consideration. I do want to echo Councillor Humphreys. Often with listed properties, and we have a lot of listed properties. I think it's somewhere in the hundreds, and then we have our designated ones as well. So and we found out that some were listed because of age, whatever. So we would often do a drive-by, and I encourage council. I haven't actually looked at it, and your eye gets kind of used to what is specific, and then it always helps to have our evaluation team go in to let us know what's going on. But sometimes when you saw what the applicant was doing and what they were replacing with, you would just marvel and say, that's fantastic. I mean, the one we're doing for the doctor's office on Wellington that just was demolished, what he's bringing in is fantastic. So it's the architects that do the wonder when they do the site, and it's very easy to say, oh, okay, well, we're losing a bit here, but look what they're putting in place. And it's their property, and we've done it several times, and it blends in, et cetera, et cetera. So that is often a very valuable tool to do the drive-by and also to have an idea what it is to bring in. Based on the comments I heard from the delegate, I'm confident that they've hired an architect and they appreciate the significance. Plus, they've lived there for 20 years. So I would easily be able to remove it from listed based on just that alone. And so that's why when I see these requests, I'm usually sort of receptive to the idea rather than how we can be sometimes overprotective.
Thank you, Councillor Abel. Councillor Maracas?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Ramuno. I'm just curious, I know we've just put it out there, but would a design review panel, would that have helped in this circumstance where we would have had an expert opinion ahead of time?
Mr. Ramuno?
Through you, Mr. Chair, certainly an application like this would have been brought forward to the design review panel, and we would have another set of eyes providing input into the applicant's request. So it certainly would have added value.
Okay, thank you. Kind of going with what Mr. Mayor was stating as far as the timelines and everything, my only concern is that if we send this back, there's a chance that the committee could end up essentially saying the same recommendation, and we would be back here with the same recommendation in front of us a month later. So that would be my only concern about putting it off. I think that maybe we should look at it and maybe make a decision tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Maracas. Just to comment on that, so I do chair the committee, and as Mayor Daw pointed out, the report that was given to us by email as an additional item, the letters from the delegation were conducted and provided after the committee meeting. There was some discussion at the committee meeting by the delegate of the condition, but there was also some discussion that the evaluation takes that into account. So the committee, I believe it was unanimous vote, voted to have the property remain listed. Having said that, you know, when there's new information, often there's new outcomes. And so I wouldn't be, I'm not presupposing a vote of a committee, but certainly with new information, it's not necessarily going to have the same outcome. But certainly you're entitled to take whatever opinion you want on that. So thanks for the comment. Councillor Gartner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's not very often that there's unanimous committee vote on anything. I think the issue was, and I don't think that this tells the whole story, I think the issue was that the refusal was based on the fact that this actually is an important facade on Metcalfe Street. And the intent, I believe, was that if it was taken off the register, that the next step would be that the whole house was going to be demolished. And from the comments of the committee was trying to suggest to the residents that either the front facade be retained or that it be replicated, and that they could do pretty much whatever they wanted with the rest of the house, but just keep that streetscape in place. So I personally was hoping that the residents would come back to the committee and say that, you know, this was what they would like to do to work with the fact that the committee felt the facade was a very important element to the street and to the heritage component of Aurora. So I didn't mark this as the end of the process. I marked this as a way that we could proceed to find a building design that would honor the facade that is there now. So I would really like it if the residents would come back to the committee meeting on the 7th, on Monday. And if we could, just to send it back to the committee, Councilor Maracas is right, it's not going to do any good. I would like for the residents to come back to, I beg your pardon?
Councillor Gardner, continue, sorry.
It would be great if the residents could come back to the committee, and if together we could figure out how they could have the house they want,
Councillor Gardner.
how they could have the house they want and still retain the heritage character of that house just at the front, because it is a very important part of the streetscape on Metcalfe. Mr. Chair, I would appreciate any addition to that if you have.
Thank you, Councilor Gardner. Yeah, I mean, that was my, with respect to the heritage meeting in question, you know, the heritage evaluation scored it fairly high. In the Heritage Working Group scored it fairly high, and again, we were told at the committee that that includes albeit somewhat cursory, understanding of the structural needs of the building. Again, we didn't receive some of the other information. So, as far as what happened at the committee meeting, I think Councilor Gardner made a good representation of what the committee's concerns were. I don't think it was, I took it the same way, that we were hoping again for some further consultation, but that at this time we would rather leave it listed. So that's the comments on the Heritage Advisory Committee meeting. Anyone else? I have Councillor Kim for the first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, after reading the communication from the delegate and listening to him today, you know, I'm in agreement with the mayor that, you know, if we do send it back to Heritage, you know, have them come back within a month. But if they cannot, and if for logistics reasons, if that's not possible, I'm pretty comfortable either voting today and taking it to next week and just finding a conclusion, because I think this is another example of where too many houses that shouldn't be on the list is on the list, and people find out in inopportune times. The delegate has shown you know, respect for architecture, and especially the architecture of that street, and wanting to be complimentary. I'm not really too concerned about you know, all the, you know, detailed guidelines of the heritage requirements, but I'm fully confident that whatever they put up is satisfactory, and given all the issues that are that the delegate is undergoing right now, I'm perfectly content with the mayor's recommendation. And if we can't do this expediently, then let's do it tonight or next week.
Thank you, Councillor Kim. Any further comments for the first time? I have Councillor Humphries for the second time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if you look at the committee recommendations, it's just saying to refuse to take it off, like, to keep it on the list of properties. So really, this is what the committee's come back with. It sounds like the committee may not have had all the information at hand. So basically, making that decision based on the committee, I guess the Heritage Committee of reviewing the property and coming up with the scoring of that property, and it showed a 2, but it actually makes you know, a very clear comment that this is based not looking at the foundation, the actual structural issues of the property. So that's a big disconnect. So you know, going to the committee, I think is a good idea, but I'd like to see it done this week. There's a meeting on Monday. Councillor Abel, correct me if I'm wrong, but we used to have many emergency meetings when it was things like this, and it was very quick to get people who on the Heritage Committee to get together quickly, even before the meeting, get all the information at hand that was, you know, provided, take another look, maybe ask them to drive by before the committee meeting or before that meeting, and then sit down and be able to do a very good, quick assessment and provide that information by next council meeting. So I don't see this as a month's delay. I think everything's there and ready to go. It's a matter of just revisiting, filling in the gaps of the information that was missing. You know, in all fairness, for whatever reason, the committee that was doing the assessment did not have these pictures and information. So I think with that, if a visit to the property is okay by the owners, let's make it happen quick. I think we can do it.
Thank you, Councillor Humphries, and certainly I have you, Councillor Maracus. Certainly that's possible, and certainly I can ask if there's members of the committee available for a quick site visit of the property before the meeting on Monday evening. But just to clarify, you know, we made the best decision with the information we had, and the report that was provided to us was done after the Heritage meeting, and so we didn't have that information at the meeting itself. But I think perhaps, I don't know if staff can bring this forward just for council's indulgence, or if it's public knowledge, I'm not sure, is the actual Heritage Working Group's evaluation of the property. I think if council would like to see that, it would also be valuable. It did score high in Group 2. It almost was a Group 1, I believe, which encourages designation. So the working group's assessment of it was very high, which obviously factored quite heavily on the Heritage Committee's recommendations. But I believe where we are at this moment in time is that the recommendation number 1 that's on the floor, the clerk is suggesting that if that is defeated and we receive the minutes for information, that the item on a walk-on on Monday night would be sufficient time to then add it on Tuesday for council. Provide an updated council. So that's where we are at this moment in time. Mayor Daw, for the second time.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, I had Councilor Maracas before you, Mr. Mayor. Councilor Maracas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with you. All the information wasn't there. I was there also, and I was observing, and I agree with you that the committee didn't have the new information, so I agree with you on that. I'm just wondering if we do get it on, I just want to make sure I understand this, if we do get it on for Monday's meeting, is it possible, whatever recommendation comes out of that, we would have it for Tuesday's council meeting, and then therefore we'd be able to make a decision?
Mr. Clerk, could you provide clarification?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Well, you certainly will not have the full minutes from that meeting. Staff will endeavor to make sure that as an additional item, at least a memo outlining what the committee's recommendation was there.
And then I guess that's great. That means that, as Councillor Humphreys mentioned, it wouldn't take a month. So yeah, I'm all for moving in that direction.
And just another clarification, if council at that time wants to make their own decision, that's also part of the process and obviously is allowed. Is that not correct, Mr. Clerk?
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mayor Daw?
Thank you. And this is just perhaps as an aside, but I'm just wondering if this is an opportunity for us to look at how we actually do some of these things. Obviously, the foundation's an issue, and if that's not looked at, I presume this is prescribed by something. I'm just wondering if there's and don't need to discuss this right now, but perhaps Mr. Ramuna could just take that away. Is there an opportunity for us to look at how we do things differently, to be a little more aware of some of the issues that happen with old buildings? That's all.
Thank you, Mayor Daw. Any further comments? Councilor Gardner, second time.
Thank you. I'm going to try and speak as clearly as I can, so there won't be any misunderstanding. I am the one who asked about the condition of the foundation, and we could see from the pictures that there were problems. I think what the committee was trying to do was they were trying to honor the evaluation, and that evaluation said that this house is significant and worthy of preservation and encourages the retention of the building as well as designation under the Ontario Heritage Act. On the other hand, I think the committee also wanted to allow the residents to build a house, a bigger house, a house more that suited their needs, while still somehow honoring the heritage significance of that house. And the way that it was suggested would be that either the facade is preserved or it's replicated. So if it goes back to the Heritage Advisory Committee, I don't think that there's going to be a 180 turnabout. I think they are going to want to have somehow this facade preserved or replicated. And what the owners want to do with the rest of the house, they can do with the rest of the house within our parameters. So, and I think that's fair to the councillors around the table. I think that's fair. It's an important facade on Metcalfe Street. And I think what the Heritage Committee is trying to preserve is fair.
Thank you, Councilor Gardner. I think if this does go back to the Heritage Committee, again, we'll be able to make recommendations based on new information. Councilor Abel.
Thank you very much. If I could ask you, when was the evaluation done? Was it done this term with the group that's doing it now? I would really appreciate seeing the evaluation report. I would really appreciate being highlighted what the significance of the front is. If it's a founder who built this and it's the last remnant of this period timepiece, much like we just saw with the important delegation last week, that it was an Italian Gothic of turn of the century. So I have a better understanding rather than someone saying, and I would like to see those scores.
Mr. Muno, would you include that in Tuesday's reports? Is that good, Councillor Abel? Thank you. Any further speakers to this item? Calling the vote then on the, I guess it's item 1, Mr. Clerk? Or just
Well, yes, the second whole clause.
the second clause, calling the vote on the second clause. All those in favor? Opposed? That's defeated. Clause 1 is the receipt of the minutes. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Thank you. And thank you very much for coming out. As you heard, this will be discussed at Heritage on the 7th. And perhaps, Mr. Muno, if you wouldn't mind speaking with them about a site visit, perhaps. Thank you. Or drive-by. Okay, committee. We're moving back to item 2. Item 2 was pulled by Councillor Gartner. Councillor Gartner, item 2.
Thank you. Let me just get my paperwork.
Would you like to put that on the floor?
I'll put that on the floor.
Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Thompson. Councillor Gardner.
I guess I would just like to ask how this happened. I was shocked that we were so over budget and that we didn't really understand that until March, and the contract ends in September. So through you, Mr. Chair, to staff, Mr. CAO, to somebody.
Mr. Elliott.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. This is a 3-year unit price contract for software licensing. When we first struck the arrangement, unfortunately, an error at the staff level, we underestimated the number of units that we would be needing in the 3-year period. And so that's explained partly. Then, over time, due to additional software users for certain packages, new packages that have been brought in that we weren't necessarily specifically anticipating would be Microsoft per se, until the RFP is actually done. That's why it was a unit price contract. We expected it to increase. Retrospectively, we should have come back to you each year on this. But we didn't, and a shortfall in our procurement system is that the PO stays open and you keep buying against it until it expires, and then suddenly you realize that you're out of approved funding, or not approved funding, approved purchasing authority. And so that's where we're coming now. It's very difficult with a unit price contract like this to come up with an accurate PO that covers you. Oftentimes, they're well overstated. If you think it's about 70, you ask for an upset limit of 90 because it allows for that flexibility because it is unit price. And unit price usually means that you don't know how many units you need to buy during the term. This was a 3-year deal, and yes, you're quite correct. It came up abruptly, and again, sort of a shortfall, first a shortfall on the staff side, but also a shortfall on our system side, and that's one of the reasons why we're looking for a new financial system.
Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Elliott. Accept the explanation. I would just like to say, through you, perhaps to Mr. CEO, that to find out that 2.5 years into a contract, we need to increase it by more than half the original price that was set aside it just can't happen. So we need to make sure it doesn't happen in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. Do you have a comment, Mr. Rosny?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I agree that the communication needs to be improved in these items. This is sort of the intersection of the purchasing system with the budgeting system and so on, in that my understanding is that this was, although not specifically related to a purchase order, was relayed to council in previous budget sessions where there was an actual increase to software costs, but the link wasn't made at that time in a formal way to the purchase order, and it certainly should have been.
Thank you, Mr. CAO. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. Through you to Mr. Elliott. Mr. Elliott, just similar to the comments around the table, it's never good to hear that the annual fee was off by 20% since 2013, but you're confident that the investment we're going to make in our future financial system will allow us to catch these issues at a much sooner time?
Mr. Elliott?
We're hoping for a more robust procurement-to-pay system of management for all staff, not just our procurement and finance staff. But here I am caught as a client of my own system. And so I've got an egg on both sides of the face, as it were.
Councillor Thompson?
Thank you.
Any further speakers to this matter? Councillor Kim?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To Mr. Elliott, I'm sure the license count are only those who really need it. And I just want to just reconfirm that, because I know in many organizations, employees will receive Visio or Project or PowerPoint, and when you do a diligence of how often they used it, I found that 20% of staff didn't even touch Visio, and we ended up paying $400 per person for a year for non-usage. How do we go about determining who really needs it, and whether maybe just give access to a select few, or how does that process work?
Mr. Elliott, do you have an answer for that?
We do it on a department-by-department basis periodically. Sometimes it's a very specific one. I know that we recently, or about a year and a half ago, did Adobe, because there's several versions of Adobe that some of which are very expensive. And so we went around department by department and identified who currently had them, and did they in fact really need them. We had a number of them were cut back and adjusted. So we are trying to manage our projects. The Microsoft is bundled as well, so that like Microsoft Office is a full bundle. But that's what we anticipate doing as the new contract comes in. It will have a component in there to evaluate our pricing and our pricing scheme as to how we do things, whether we choose to subscribe to cloud service versus on-site licensing versus enterprise or seat. But we do, as part of that process, we'll be reviewing the cost of each license and with each department as to exactly who needs it and how. But at this point in time, the IT group does not have the authority to retract a license, contrary to the direction of the director, obviously. So.
Thank you, Mr. Elliott. And sorry, before I go back to Councillor Kim, the CAO, Mr. Nadarozny has a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I just may add to Mr. Elliott's comments, having looked at this before approving it and having some of the concerns that are already being expressed around the table, the other thing I want to add, though, to Mr. Elliott's comments is one of the reasons for this is the increased use of mobile devices. And there's a huge efficiency by getting some of this technology out into the field in the hands of our staff, closer to the front line. But the way this works is that you end up licensing more than one agreement. So it's not just a one-to-one. It's not only like new people are coming on or we're handing out extra licenses for people that aren't really using the software. In some cases, due to the licensing structures, you end up paying for 2 licenses for one employee. But in those cases, what we'll be careful to do is make sure that the cost benefit is there, that we're achieving better service levels or more efficiencies by having that extra license. But that's one of the drivers of the license count as well. So I just wanted to add that.
Councillor Kim?
Yeah, and just one final question through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Elliott. You mentioned looking into the N6 cooperation, and indeed we have that in one of the items tonight. Is there an opportunity to have this be a one-year contract, and just to kind of gauge when the other communities, their contract expires, so that maybe we can look into this and maybe gain some benefits earlier than a 3-year contract?
Mr. Elliott?
I'll certainly take that suggestion under advisement. We'll certainly be looking at the N6, but again, we're dealing with Microsoft, and so this is very much like David and Goliath. You get what you get from Microsoft. Banding together sometimes can help, but sometimes it doesn't help. So we'll see what happens, but we'll take it back under advisement and look at those things.
Thank you, Councillor Kim. Councillor Abel?
Thank you, and I do have concerns when we have requests like these to extend funding for already approved projects or licenses. And we should ask questions as a council. So I appreciate some of the comments. I know last week we were laboring on very similar matters. But at the end, we have to look at the overall picture. What you want to do is avoid certain problems. And when I hear computer, I immediately think of the Toronto scandal back years ago. Well, that was huge. That was a big one, but I'm not inferring that, but that's why we are always monitoring, and it's our job to do so rather than to blanket acceptance. So I appreciate the comments from all the councillors, and although I'm not a computer person, I'm in support of moving this forward as requested.
Thank you, Councillor Abel. Any further comments to this item? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor of item 2? Opposed? That carries, Mr. Clerk. Moving to item 3, which was pulled by Councillor Thompson.
I'll move the staff recommendation.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Humphreys. Councillor Thompson?
Thank you. Through to Mr. Simonauskas. Mr. Simonauskas, which library stairs are we talking about? Is it the one in the parkway, in the parking lot?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's primarily the sidewalk sections by the new library and between the new library and the Church Street School. I mean, there may be some areas around the old library that we should probably secure. I know there was some issues last year, and if there's anything remaining, we do need to address it. But what I've identified in the report is that if we're spending any money on the older buildings that are up for redevelopment, that we're not going to proceed with any work until we've conferred with Mr. Downey as to the status of those buildings, or if there's any direction from council as to not to proceed with any other works.
Councillor Thompson?
Thank you, and perhaps you'll allow me a little bit of latitude. Last term, we talked about the stairs around the library, both at the front entrance as well as in other places, because a resident had come forward with an idea of changing those stairs to make them look like books. And I had conversations with Mr. Simonauskas. It was brought to the library board as well. You know, it was a really great concept that's been done in other places. I think some pictures were provided about New York City making certain stairs look like piano keys and all kinds of different things. And so, you know, I guess if there's an opportunity to explore a little bit outside of the box here and maybe revisit that idea with regards to developing those stairways so that they also just sort of help promote the library. It would be a great eye catcher, especially for the ones that front Yonge Street, if there was some sort of change to it to help scream out, here's the library, come visit us. So I appreciate allowing the little latitude. I know it's not very specific, but I just wanted to bring that up because I still personally really like that idea of making those alterations to the stairs to kind of coincide with the library's mandate.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Abel?
Yeah,
Elmar, do you have anything to say about that? Sorry, Mr. Simonauskas, do you have any comment on that? Sorry, Councillor Abel.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I do know that the individual who brought that idea forward, we were open to doing some pilot areas. I didn't hear anything further from that, but I'd be happy to reach out to the individual and see if there's still an interest, if that's what the intent of the motion or the question.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson?
Or maybe we just take the leadership on it. And I mean, you're very well versed in materials and concerns and all that stuff. And maybe at this point it's us taking the lead as opposed to looking to others.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Abel?
Well, it's funny, Councillor Thompson brought it up. We were just talking about it on Friday, and I reminded him that we have been that this project had been there, and so we had agreed that it was a pretty novel idea. Councillor Thompson said it had been tried in other jurisdictions in New York, as he mentioned, and I thought with the 150th coming up for Canada that this would be an opportunity. So when I said to Councillor Thompson, this is coming up on our agenda, I had just seen the headline, but I hadn't read the report. So I found out that the report was the other side where there are no stairs and it's a walkway where it's broken up. And I was at the library on Saturday looking and going, this is where the problem is. And so now you've indicated that, you know, you may just want to hold everything just pending what's going to happen, because I think the precinct says they're recommending a 6-story parking garage or something right there. So you may want to not put that money in if it's going to rip up. But perhaps with that budgeted item sitting here, we might want to use that in the short term for the 150th, and I think it's a great idea for the library myself, and I think Councillor Thompson agrees. So I don't know if we amend it or we do it through the 150th committee. I know, Mr. Mayor, you chair on that, and I know a couple of councillors were there at the first one, but it might be one of the projects we want to put forward for moving forward on the 150th, and maybe part of our ask. I know our MPs want to get involved in the 150th and all the grant applications if we have something available for them to review, to consider. So I'm very much in favor. I know it's a bit odd, but at first blush, I thought we were talking about those stairs on Yonge Street. And that's what immediately made me think of that and bring it up to Councillor Thompson. So I don't know how we should go ahead with that, Mr. Chair, but I think we'll hear other comments. Maybe there's a gathering here, and as Councillor Thompson says, we can perhaps show a bit of leadership and start driving a few of these items forward.
Thank you, Councillor Abel. Mr. Clerk, would you like to comment?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, if a committee wants to go in a very different direction or than what's proposed here, it'd be my suggestion that the matter be referred back to staff for a further report.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Councillor Gardner, Mr. Clerk. Oh, I'm losing it already. Councillor Gardner, you would like to comment?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Simonovskis, on page 2 at the bottom, just above link to the strat plan. So you are talking about council will have an opportunity to delete work in these areas, you know, should we decide something that would be contrary to this in the cultural precinct plan. So I'm not clear, is this work that, this is work that needs to be done?
Mr. Simonovskis?
Certainly through Mr. Chair, it's work that needs to be done from a safety perspective.
Right.
However, if there's a decision, and I believe I'd put some timing in there, whether it's over the next 6 months or so,
Yeah.
to basically, if there's a direction from council to do something different with those properties or those areas, then we can, you know, hoard them off, isolate the public from them, and then make those new decisions based on recommendations that are coming forward from staff on that precinct proposal.
Thank
Councilor
you.
Gardner?
So for clarification, through you to Mr. Simonov, through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Simonovskis. So we're not, even if council approves this money at council, you won't be going out and doing the work right away. You will be waiting.
Mr. Simonovskis?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we'll, before we actually commit to doing the work, I will be working with Mr. Downey as well as whatever reports come forward to council, so that if it's imminent that a change is going to happen, I don't want to spend the money, but we will hit a point where we're going to have to spend some money if that change isn't in short order.
Councilor Gardner?
So through you again, so it's a placeholder for the moment?
Yes.
And thank you, and if it is unsafe, I don't want to say those words in the council chamber, if there needs to be improvements to increase the safety, then we have to do something now to increase the safety in some way, including perhaps blocking it off?
Mr. Simonovskis?
Through you, Mr. Chair, with the approval to proceed with this project, there will be a scope of work issued and tenders released. That process will probably take 6 to 8 weeks, so we won't be able to start work till April, end of April anyway. If there's change in direction from council by that time, we will then not do the work. So there's time for council through the process that Mr. Downey is following to make a decision to either demolish those buildings or do something else, then we will cease. If it's not an imminent solution, if we don't have answers by the spring, we're going to proceed with some works.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Gardner. Are there any other speakers to this item? I don't see any, so we're calling a vote on the item. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries, Mr. Clerk. Move to item 6, which was pulled by Councilor Gardner.
Thank you. Move as is.
Is there a seconder? Councilor Kim? Councilor Gardner?
Thank you. I thought this was a very interesting motion that Councillor Kim brought forward and that Council passed, because there always can be room for improvement and transparency. So I've read the report. Through you, I guess, to Mr. our clerk who's done this report, is there anything in this report, is there anything that you've discovered that we can use to make this a better and more transparent process for the public?
Mr. Clerk?
Thank you. Through Mr. Chair, as we were investigating this report, actually, the procurement staff, we are always looking for opportunities to improve and make our procurement process best practices in the public sector. And in fact, we are in the process of actually reviewing our procurement bylaw to see for opportunities for updates. We did want to address Councillor Kim's motion, though, as set out in the referral. But we are in the process, it is on our work plan to review that and eventually to come back to Council.
Councillor Gardner?
So when you're looking at improvements to the procurement process, are you going to be looking at any of the information in this report?
Mr. Clerk?
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I might request the councillor the information that's set out in this report.
With respect to these two issues?
Pardon me, through you, Mr. Chair, certainly. We will. We always review all the opportunities, so we will be looking always at our cooperative procurement processes and our piggyback procurement processes to make sure that they are meeting or exceeding public sector procurement standards in this field.
Thank you, and hopefully with the addition of accessible and transparent government to the public.
Mr. Clerk?
That's a statement.
That's a statement?
It's a statement.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. Any further comments on this? I have Councillor Kim.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I read item 6 in the report, and I had an opportunity to discuss with staff, and I'm very thankful that they wrote a very thorough and detailed report back. It answers all the questions I had previously. You know, on page 29, items 4 to 6 in particular, you know, the fact that you know, any one of the N6 municipalities being able to participate in the process, be fully, you know, be in the loop, and also just the you know, the time savings. I didn't realize there were, you know, I think upwards of 40 procurements that are going on at any given time, or at least that's what's going on right now, and just the time savings. You know, so just reading the report, you know, I don't really have any further comments. I know that I had one issue in the past related to the motion that I put forward, but you know, that was just, you know, to explain it was a very unique situation, and I'm fully satisfied with that. So I'm fully happy to receive this report as is. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kim. Any other speakers to this item? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries, Mr. Clerk. Move to item 7, which is the Parks and Rec Master Plan update. This was pulled by Councillor Abel.
Thank you. I will move as is.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Thompson? Councillor Abel?
Thank you very much. You know, I would first like to look at number 39 on page 9 of the report. And it has some big bold letters, not subject to this report. And I'm just wondering if I could get some sort of explanation what that means. Through you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Downey?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we weren't sure what order you were going to be dealing with the agenda. So item number 9 on tonight's agenda dealt specifically with recommendation 39. And we wanted to ensure that if council happened to approve number 7, it wasn't also approving 39 if that wasn't your desire.
Councillor Abel, is that?
Yes, so and I mentioned it when we discussed item 9. Part of the master plan was to comment on our pieces of property that we have in the town. So it kind of caught me, and then of course we're dealing with the item on item 9. So my comment remains the same. I would thought we were going to be talking more of the Parks and Rec master plan. So So, and I appreciate some of these are in high priority, and that helps me digest the report, because it's pretty, it's complex. You have to read each part. So, and in numbers 1 and 4 and 6, they're on pages 34 and 35. These are high priorities, and they're fairly high dollar amounts as I look at them. They talk about gymnasiums, indoor aquatics, multipurpose community center in number 1. And I think that's worth referring to. I'm glad to see that that's in there. Again, number 4 talks about a big pool and a gymnasium. So I guess my comment would be that we should be considering that as being identified as part of our move forward. Numbers 14, 15, and 16 are high priorities, and they're talking about potential use of the former public library into multi-use community centers. So I'm pleased to see that that surplus land has been identified, because they're out of commission, and the Parks and Rec Master Plan have identified that surplus as well, and a high priority, and it addresses a public library. So this is something I think the mayor mentioned before, that the library squares, we affectionately call it, should be looked at. I did ask the director last fall, and I think he said there's been 26 reports to date prior to the facilities report, the cultural precinct, and this master plan, all touching on the library square. So not only has it been a long time, we've got a lot of material already on this. So here's the master plan addressing it. Our Parks and Rec master plan is making reference to it. Councillor Kim did point out number 21 about constructing 2 additional outdoor tennis courts in the northeast quadrant. I caught my eye as well. And again, I guess just in summary, it's the need for a multi-sport sort of idea that number 37, acquiring larger neighborhood parks and community parks, should have a priority for accommodating a broad range of recreational pursuits and partnerships, et cetera, like that. So I'm glad to see that that plan highlighted that as well, number 37. And those are just some of my comments. So, again, I appreciate the plan coming forward. I like the idea that there's high priorities, medium priorities, and it's sort of staged on how we move forward on doing things. And I guess in summary, and I'll just mention that a high priority is the library square. So I'm hoping that we will have an opportunity to start moving forward as we're entering the second half of our second year of our term. So my point is we don't have a lot of time, and those are sort of my highlights and focuses on this.
Thank you, Councillor Abel. I have Councillor Thompson, then Mayor Daw. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. Through you to Mr. Downey. Mr. Downey, often, we receive these master plans, but there's always questions about the financial implications, and certainly those are many of these things are subject to budgetary approvals or future reports. But I'm just curious whether or not many of these recommendations, if not all of these recommendations, are already in our 10-year capital asset plan, or do you see that if approved, some of these recommendations will now have to be worked into that 10-year capital plan that Mr. Elliott provides us?
Mr. Downey?
Through you, Mr. Chair, a little bit of both. Some of them are, and some of them may find their way into the plan that, because they're not presently recognized, depending on what feasibility studies reveal. But many of the projects that are identified within the master plan or are being contemplated within the master plan are in our 10-year forecast and within our DC bylaw.
That's great, thank you. Because I think, one of the first challenges we had last term was that, there was a relatively new Parks and Rec master plan, which had a whole bunch of recommendations. And as a new councillor, you come to that understanding that while, and I forget how many recommendations there were, it's a significant amount of dollars associated with those recommendations, they still are subject to, as you go through it. Same thing with the Trails Master Plan and everything else. It provides a great framework by which to guide strategic decisions, as well as for Mr. Elliott to be able to ensure that we have the funds available. But I like how you've put the recommendation that it is subject to council approval of budgetary implications, because at the end of the day, while they may be the recommendation, we still need to see the feasibility reports or the information associated with the individual items to ensure that it's the right thing to do. So I'm in full support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Mayor Daw?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Downey, thank you very much for a comprehensive report. There is 44, 45 recommendations here. More than half, 29, are high. And I know that you're coming back with an implementation plan, but that's a rather big chunk of activity for council to digest. Could you give us a sense of how you look at, they're all high, but they can't all be the same high. Didn't sound right, did it? So do you have can you give us a sense of how you're going to prioritize some of these?
Mr. Downey?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I recognize that many of them are a high priority. I don't believe they can all be done at the same time. The implementation plan that we are proposing to come back to council with will prioritize these from 1 to whatever number, and identify if there's any budgetary implications for some of those. Some of the actions here that don't have budgetary implications, we may be able to move forward with sooner than later. The other ones, we may have to wait for budget approvals, depending on which year we want to bring those things forward. So that's the purpose of coming forward with an implementation plan, is we are going to take all our high priorities, put them into a numerical list, and then go from 1 to whatever that last number is.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think one of the issues that we're going to have to look at, and we had the discussion with respect to the item that was on previously, the Mavernack Block 208, and we talked about tennis courts, and one of the criteria, or one of the elements in the plan here is in the northeast quadrant. Well, I would suggest this up at St. John's and Leslie. So I think we're going to have to be very clear as to what, when we decide what is the northeast quadrant, that we have to be fairly clear on how we come up with those criteria. So I just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Daw. I have Councillor Kim.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Downey, on item 8, it discusses or talks about proactively monitoring membership and program participation, and in the end, in order to inform a subsequent business planning process that explores, viability and suitability of expanding the Club Aurora. I admit that Club Aurora is doing well, and there's certainly a need, especially from what I understand, some of the seniors in Aurora feel more comfortable in an atmosphere of working out in an atmosphere like Club Aurora as opposed to a public facility. That said, I'm of the view that a town should not be in the business of running a gym membership. However, it's there and people are enjoying it, and it's great. But we spent a lot of time the last year and a half, discussing Club Aurora, and I'm not sure, is item number 8 specifically to implement the possibility of a second facility, Or is this also just for just monitoring, the performance and KPI to ensure that current members are being serviced well? Because if it is to, look at the possibilities of a second facility, personally, I'm not totally sold on that, because I find that the private sector does that type of business a lot more efficiently than we do, and the facilities might not be there right now, but until the demand is there, but all that demand is taken up by Club Aurora currently, then there's no incentive for a private facility to open up to offer that service. So what I'm asking is number 8 specifically the objective to open up a second facility, or is this merely to ensure our service levels are adequate?
Mr. Downey?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the purpose of number 8 in discussions with the consultant was that with the growth of the community, there may be a need for an additional fitness facility, a town fitness facility. However, in order to make that case, we need to make sure that we have performance measures in our existing facility that would support moving forward to a second facility or a larger facility. So it's somewhat twofold. First of all, we should be monitoring the performance, and we are monitoring the performance of our existing facility. And at some point, those metrics are going to indicate that we should perhaps be looking at expanding that facility, and we will be bringing a report forward to council when those performance measures indicate that we should be looking at an additional facility.
In terms of resources from the consultant or staff, is this, if this is just going to be taking a few dozen hours over the course of the 2 years, it's not a big issue, but if this is going to be a highly intensive monitoring review, I'm wondering whether we need to have that discussion sooner rather than later at the table as to whether this is something that we want to have in the future for Aurora, which is a second location. And that's what this is proposing to do, right?
Mr. Downey?
Mr. Chair, what it's stating is that we should be monitoring our membership to determine whether or not it merits the need for a second facility. Now, with regards to staff time associated with this, this is very much a business unit within the department, and so we treat it very much as a business. So we look at performance measures within that business unit, such as retention of members, whether or not we are meeting our market, whether or not we have sustained our growth, whether or not we have reached a growth where we can no longer provide adequate service to our members, and whether or not we need to then either reduce the membership or expand our facility. Those are some of the metrics that we need to bring forward in order to make or support a case for doing any modifications over and above what we already have. So it's not recommending that we do it, but it is recommending that we put some measures in place so that when that time comes, that we will be able to make a business case to council as to whether what steps we take next. And as I say, if council decides that we don't want to look at an expanded fitness facility, then maybe what we need to do then is look at a reduced membership, so that the product that we offer our members appropriately services their needs.
Thank you, Mr. Downey. So I guess what I'm hearing is this is something that could be discussed 2 or 3 years down the road, because it's not exercising a lot of resources. And I guess if 2 years down the road we find that our current facilities are sufficient, then we don't even have to have the conversation until we actually come to that road. So I'm fine in waiting to discuss that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kim. Councillor Humphreys?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, my questions were answered. Thank you so much. It's a pretty intensive report. And just one comment, Councillor Abel made mention of Library Square, and I did notice that construct on item number 25, construct an urban water feature. Sounds like something that we may be very interested in at the Aurora Promenade area, so interesting, but very good, lots of work ahead for sure.
Thank you, Councillor Humphreys. Councillor Maracas? You're okay? Okay. Councillor Gardner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Al, for all of the work that you've done with this. It's pretty intensive and extensive. Could you speak to item number 4? In particular, I'm on page 2, and it says, in the event, etc., and that we are comfortable with the level of risk associated with adding new aquatic infrastructure. Could you say what that means exactly?
Mr. Downey?
Through you, Mr. Chair, actually, there was quite a bit of discussion. I apologize, I wanted to make sure I read it and understood it, so forgive me. But during the research with the master plan and the input that we were getting from the user groups, primarily aquatics user groups, there was quite a push to come forward with a new facility. And quite frankly, the consultant wasn't convinced that we needed a new aquatic facility immediately, and that perhaps we should be looking at other opportunities to provide that service. So he believes that the level of risk right now is fairly low with regards to our need for a new facility. I think, you know, the Ducks might disagree, yes. But we're not going to get agreement from everyone. I'm sorry, the Ducks are the swim team. But the case is that, or the position that we have right now is that if you can build a case for the need for additional aquatic facility, that case needs to be built. Then we need to figure out what options are available in order to address that need prior to us ever coming forward to council with any recommendations of providing a new aquatic facility.
Thank you, and I think that's wise because as far as I know, aquatic facilities only support themselves by about 50% from user fees, and the rest comes from taxpayer dollars. So they're very expensive for the taxpayers to subsidize. Is that, Mr. Chair, would you say that's a relatively correct statement?
Mr. Downey?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not aware of an aquatic facility that makes money. Generally, if there's a center that isn't a profit situation, it has other amenities besides aquatics associated with it. But aquatics is, without a doubt, a drawing card for any recreation facility, and certainly is something that people are interested and participate in on an ongoing basis from early in their life, with learning to swim to, as we know, a very active aquafit program going on in the town. So we generally provide that service, even though we know that service is not, for lack of a better word, a moneymaker or a profit center within the corporation.
Councillor Gardner?
Thank you. Thank you. And I do note under 4B, we're talking about if we do perhaps build a new facility, we might somehow be looking at providing a warmer water leisure therapy tank that certainly would be appreciated by the seniors in the community. I'm looking also at number 16. That's page 5. It's talking about keeping the senior center as the primary hub for the 55-plus generation. And it's the next part that I really like. while exploring ways to extend the reach of services into neighborhoods through use of existing multi-use community centers, parks, etc. Because the senior center is far away for some seniors. So if we could provide a way to use our facilities, perhaps with seniors in mind, that also would be very helpful. I mean, in a few years, we're going to be hitting this huge bulge of baby boomers. I don't know, I think it's going to be 35% of the population. So I'm actually not sure that the Parks and Rec Master Plan takes that into enough consideration. On page 6, number 18, talking about an outdoor artificial turf field. Do you have any idea where we would put that? Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Downey?
Mr. Downey?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it actually states where, at Stuart Burnett Park.
Where?
Where in Stuart Burnett Park? It would be on the westerly limit of the park, just north of the fire hall. That would be that's the best approximation I can use. So you're going to have the ball diamond, if you look at my hands. You're going to have the ball diamond.
Yes.
Okay. And then you're going to have the tennis courts right beside them.
Yeah.
And then you're going to have Stuart Burnett. But then you're going to have the
Another
multipurpose
artificial.
field.
Thank you. Also, number 20 is a new ball diamond, a larger size ball diamond. Any idea where that might go?
Mr. Downey?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we do not have a space available for that ball diamond unless we look at a repurposing of an existing facility. So that is one of the things that we are looking at, is that the parks that we have, if we are not acquiring sufficient lands in order to provide the facilities that we need, perhaps we need to look at repurposing facilities that we perhaps can phase out and repurpose them into a different type of facility. So I haven't got a location at this point, but we will be looking at perhaps enlarging some existing diamonds that might accommodate that, and that will be coming back in a report.
Thank you. And with respect to the 2 additional outdoor tennis courts, is that still in the works now that we have the bubble, or we're going to have 6 courts in the bubble?
Mr. Downey?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, we are looking at the provision of some additional tennis courts. In fact, we were just discussing it among our staff the other day. There are some opportunities within the 2C area, and now with the approval of the Maverick Park, I guess I can call it that, or not quite yet, it hasn't been council approved. We can also look at that location, but there are some locations within the 2C area that the 2 tennis courts could be accommodated.
Thank you, Mr. Downey. Just to let you know, Councillor Gardner, you're approaching your 10 minutes, so just give you a heads up.
And I get another chance at that? Do I get 10 and 10?
Yes, on your second round, after everyone else has spoken for the first time. You have 2 minutes left if you could wrap it up in 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you. With respect to the 800-meter service radius that is unobstructed by major pedestrian barriers when we're looking at playgrounds, speaking about seniors, is that just the same parameter for playgrounds, parks, parkettes? Maybe not parkettes, playgrounds and parks?
Mr. Downey?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the service level for playgrounds is a playground within an 800-meter radius. That is exactly the same service level for neighborhood parks. So whether it has a playground in it or not, as long as there is a neighborhood park within 800 meters, that service level has been met.
Councillor Gardner?
Thank you. I do think that we need to think about people getting older and walking to parks. And perhaps that'll come up at council in the future. Thank you. I have 2 more questions. Should I?
Do you think you'll be able to wrap it up in a minute?
Nope.
Okay, I'll ask if there's any other speakers for the...
I smell your coffee.
I see none. Councillor Gardner, you can resume.
Thank you. Number 40, through you, Mr. Chair. Number 40, it's on page 10, work with the land development industry to innovatively address the needs for parks, such as developing publicly accessible lands on private land. Can you just, through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Downey, how can you see that working? How do you see that working?
Mr. Downey?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that idea actually was presented to council with the cultural precinct. If you recall, there was opportunity for rooftop gardens or rooftop green space within the development options on the cultural precinct. So we're also looking at the provision of green space by the private sector, or the provision by the private sector on any development opportunity that might come. And as I said, we did present that idea with the cultural precinct.
Thank you. A follow-up. I mean, I love the idea of rooftop gardens. I just wouldn't have thought of it as a park. 41, please, it's a great idea to try and explore barrier-free accessibility-related improvements to trails. It'd be really nice to have some accessible trails in Aurora. It'd be really nice to have at least one accessible trail in Aurora. And with respect to the last question, number 44, with the wildlife park, Mr. Downey, the wildlife park is I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, is a passive park where we are going to be very strict about where the public is going to walk and what the public can do in that park, so as we don't disturb the wildlife that we're trying to protect.
Mr. Downey?
Through you, Mr. Chair, Council is going to have an opportunity to delve into some of those issues when we ultimately get a master plan approved for the wildlife park. There are areas within the park where our partners, primarily Ducks Unlimited, have stated that they are going to be restricting public access into their particular area during certain periods of time. So we are looking at alternative pathways that the public can use on an ongoing basis that would circumvent or move around that area in order to ensure that there is appropriate habitat for ducks and birds within that area. The design of the wildlife park, as you may know, is of such that we are doing our best to provide opportunity for people to view wildlife without actually interacting with wildlife. So that's a bit of our challenge, and we will be somewhat restrictive on some of the areas that we will not permit the public to go in because it will have an impact on maintaining wildlife within that particular area, making sure that dogs are definitely on leashes, and as I say, there may be times where the public will be restricted within the park, but that will be on a very limited basis.
Councilor Gardner?
Thank you, Mr. Downey. I'm glad to hear all of that. With respect to the public being restricted, I'm not really thinking about the public being exactly restricted, but they will be restricted probably by fencing or barriers of some sort as to what areas of the park they can actually walk freely in.
Mr. Downey?
Through you, Chair, we're going to do our best to make sure there's no fencing. That wouldn't be our intent. Our intent would be to ensure that the design of the park permitted you to walk through the park, and as I say, get views. Dave Thomas illustrates it better than anyone, but you can get views into an area without actually being in the area. So if this center area was a bird habitat, you could walk around the outside of it without actually walking through it. So we can provide opportunity for the public to walk around and see within that area without actually interacting with the wildlife.
Thank you, Mr. Downey.
Thank you, Councilor Gardner. Are there any more comments on item 7? See, Councilor Abel?
Could I ask how much this cost? What did we budget for this master plan?
Mr. Downey?
Through Mr. Chair, the master plan and the sports plan were put together in one RFP, and I'm, I hate guessing, as you know.
Okay, you can bring
But I believe it's somewhere around 80,000, but I'd be happy to provide council with the results of that RFP. I know I did report it to council, but I haven't got that number in front of
If
me.
you don't mind, and since it's sports plan, if you could split, or to say what the split was, rather than just one total.
Okay.
We had, through you, Mr. Chair, we had an accessible park at our civic park here. I think we budgeted $150,000 and approved in consultation, and I think in some detail we were waiting for a report on a detailed rendering of what it looked like. It seems a couple of years since then. It could, and it's not in here, so I'm just wondering if I could get an update on that.
Is that something?
Or if it doesn't belong, just tell me.
Mr. Downey, do you have a comment?
No, the park has been, the design has been approved, the design's been completed, the tender documents have been prepared, and it's in the procurement process right now.
Councillor Abel.
Thank you. And so number 29, while we're on the AODA for accessibility and disability, so number 29 on your report on page 7, throughout playground inspection and renewal process, evaluate opportunities in which to incorporate barrier-free components to facilitate access. So I'm glad to see that that is written in there and it's a high priority. So I would imagine that if we are doing any more park and playgrounds, that will always be part of what we would propose for options going forward on new playgrounds, as well as evaluating them when we renew any of the old playgrounds, an opportunity again to include that design into going forward. Is that basically what we're looking at there? Through you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Downey? Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, that's what the recommendation suggests, and so that as we move forward with any renewal or upgrading of playground equipment, with that consideration will be given. Those opportunities can't happen in every single playground, but we should at least be exploring those opportunities whenever we can.
Yes, yes, and thank you. And I think ideally, in 30 years, every park with a playground would have that incorporated.
Thank you, Councillor Abel. Any more comments to item 7? If not, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Those opposed? That carries, Mr. Clerk. Moving to item 8. That was pulled by Councillor Abel, the Sport Master Plan. Councillor Abel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll move the recommendation.
Seconded by Councillor Thompson. Councillor Abel?
Yes, and I was looking at, and I think it just needs a little more time on my part to digest what it is here. At first look, I thought it looked a bit thin, but I have to get a better understanding of some of the points that are going in there. It was easier for me to move forward with this, with the Parks and Rec plan, because we had one before and it seemed to me more familiar and a little more detailed. This is our first rendering of a sport plan, and so I think that's I think that's pretty what it is. To me, some of the part was how we're going to move in with more staffing, and that was one thing that kind of caught me. And it's just a comment rather than anything else. I think it's just a work that'll be in progress with the sporting community. I think that's just it. It was a good notice of motion. It was brought up by Councillor Thompson last year, about a year ago now. So I'm glad to see it's here and included as we go forward.
Thank you, Councillor Abel. I have Mayor Daw.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Downey. One of the, I guess in the introduction of the sport plan, one of the comments was that while participation in sports is increasing, participation in organized sports is decreasing. And I kind of wondered if you might have any insight on that statement.
Mr. Downey?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe there was a time where if you wanted to participate in an activity, it was generally an organized activity. People are, at least what we're hearing now, is that people are interested in a variety of different opportunities and are interested in those opportunities at a variety of different times. There's a movement towards a physical literacy. And what I mean by that is that people are looking at providing recreational or physical opportunities in a number of different areas. They want to play basketball and volleyball and hockey and swim and maybe do the climbing wall or whatever it happens to be. But they're looking at a number of different activities. So the time where you were played hockey and you did nothing but play hockey, you'll find that those sports are getting less desirable, and what is becoming more desirable are individual opportunities that you can go off and play hockey at some point and then perhaps swim. In fact, we're having conversations with our community groups right now that if you happen to be on with minor hockey, instead of having hockey practice on Tuesday night, maybe we'll have you swim that night, or maybe we'll have you play ball that night, or maybe you'll go to the gym and play basketball or volleyball that night as opposed to practice hockey. So that you are provided recreational opportunities outside of that organized event, and it broadens your interest and it broadens your physical literacy with regards to how well you can perform and how active you are. And we're finding that that is playing big dividends, particularly in our younger groups, our younger kids who are starting to learn younger now how to skip and bounce a ball and some of those things that we used to take for granted but don't necessarily have those opportunities anymore. I digress a little bit, but I remember a conversation having with the president of the swim club with a new swimmer. And one of the first things they have to teach them to do is a somersault, believe it or not, because they don't know how to do a somersault. They've never been taught to do a somersault. And they need to do a somersault in order to do a flip turn in the pool. And so before they can get them in the pool and do a flip turn, you got to teach them to do a somersault. And so that's of interest to them. And then, and so that builds, as I say, their physical literacy, and then that translates into perhaps them getting into some gymnastics or getting into another activity beyond what they originally intended to be, which was swimming. So I know that was a bit of a long-winded answer, but it's not so easy because a lot of people want opportunity, but don't necessarily want to be part of a group.
Mr. Mayor?
Thank you. Well, and I guess maybe part of the takeaway there is we also have to be aware as we move forward in whatever facilities we provide, whether or not we're providing sort of drop-in capability, as an example, through the gym, as opposed to registered leagues. So I presume you're taking that into account. The other one is item 3 in the sport plan, which is at the top of page 47. And I'm not going to say whether I agree or disagree with the recommendation. I'm just going to merely point out, Mr. Downey, that you might have your work cut out for you on that particular recommendation. So that's the only comment I was going to make.
Do you want a response from Mr. Downey?
Sure.
Mr. Downey?
I bet he's got one.
This is no doubt. However, I do agree with it. I think it's something that is important, that if we do have a sports council, that it have representation of the sports community and not some of the sports community. So that certainly is a discussion that's taking place within my office and the community groups. My goal would be to bring all the groups together, and if we need a new executive structure in order to make that happen, then that's something that we should be pursuing. And as you can see, it's a short-term or a high priority within the sports plan, because a governance model with regards to that is going to be important.
Thank you, Mr. Downey. Mayor Dahl? Thank you. I have Councillor Thompson next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Certainly along those lines, I think there are a number of recommendations here that I'm going to assume they're going to be subject to further reports because it's not necessarily clear. For example, the second one says changing the name of the Parks and Rec Committee to more of from an advisory role to a coordinating role. So is it fair to assume that with regards to some of these recommendations that you would bring forth a report to at least outline it to give us a better understanding of the intent or the terms for that new committee? Mr. Downey?
Mr. Downey?
The third recommendation of this report is that we bring back an implementation plan. So it is our intent that we would take these, in fact, I'm working on that report right now, take the recommendations, prioritize them, identify a timeline associated with each one of these priorities, and so that council had some idea when you would be seeing these coming before you for discussion. And at that time, yes, we would then be bringing a report forward, giving you some options or exploring how we might make that happen. The time frame that we've identified, even though it might be a high priority, would be for discussion purposes. It might be the execution wouldn't be until the end of this term, for instance. But that would be an option available to council. But it's subject to further discussion. We're not asking you to approve these recommendations as they are right now. You will get that opportunity through an implementation plan.
Thank you, Mr. Downey. And while all of the recommendations in principle have merit, but I think they are subject to further discussion. I know for myself, I do support the establishment of a sport development officer, but my perspective may not necessarily be to go out and hire a new position. It may be looking at our existing complement and repurposing. Others may have different points of view. So I think it's important to clarify that a lot of these recommendations will be subject to further reports. Council will have an opportunity to have input on them at that time, based upon whatever the recommendation is, and that we'll have a more fulsome discussion on many of these because, in principle, I think they're all very, very good, but once you get into the details and understand them better, there may be some changes that are needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson, and I would agree with that statement as well. That's how certainly I interpreted it, is that we're endorsing these the plans, both the last one and this one, but there will be further comment on a lot of these items as they come forward back to council. Because most of mine were talked about, but I also was looking for a bit more information about item number 6B, which is to train staff and volunteers in working with culturally diverse groups to better understand their sport needs. Again, I don't have to go into tonight, but certainly a sport like soccer transcends culture. And finding out, to me, it might get a bit difficult to identify, what does it say, culturally appropriate sports. I just don't know what that is. But again, we're going to be getting that information in further reports, so I'm happy to discuss it at that moment in time. Are there any more speakers to this item? Seeing Councillor Gardner.
Thank you. Well, I'm glad to hear the comments because these are very interesting ideas. Some may be hard to do, some may be expensive. There is one, though, on page 4, and it's 6G, and it's talking about assessing the current provision of sports for older adults in all sectors in Aurora. I remember the schools, when the schools were built and people thought they were built just with more than enough capacity, and all of a sudden the baby boom kids hit and there was an explosion of portables. And I don't want Aurora to be caught not being prepared for the explosion of baby boomers. It has a midterm, a 2 to 3 year timing on it, and I think maybe we need to start thinking about that earlier. It may not affect our council, but it certainly will affect the beginning of the next one. guess that's all for now.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. Any further comments from the committee? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries, Mr. Clerk. Move then to item 11. So I'll give a minute or two for Mayor Dodd to clear out.
I'll move the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Kim. Councillor Thompson? Is there any comments on this item? Councillor Gardner?
My comments are about signage on page 10 and 13 of the report. So this, I guess through you to Mr. Minow. Mr. Minow, looking at page 10, we have the west face of the building, and there's 6 signs. And then on page 13, we have the south face of the building. Now, I don't see any signs there, but I think there's retail there, although I may be wrong. So when we're looking at this and we're approving this, are we also approving at this time all of this signage?
Mr. Amuno?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no. When council approved the site plan a couple years ago, you approved obviously the look of the building. However, I don't believe the applicant has come forward with uses for that commercial space, so they would have to deal with our sign, current sign bylaw, and if they need a exception or variance to that, there'll be an additional report in front of council for the variance to the sign bylaw.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. Any comments, further comments on this? Thank you. I'll call the vote then on item 11. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Someone go get Jeff. Do you want to go get Jeff? Thank you. We'll move on to item 17. The Parks and Rec Advisory Committee meeting minutes, February 18th, 2016. I'll ask Councillor Gardner to put that on the floor.
Thank you, but I know that Councillor Humphreys wants to speak to it as well, so maybe we could just wait a moment.
Well, Councillor Humphreys is absent, so
Has she left for the evening?
I don't know, but I would ask perhaps if you would just put something on the floor.
Well, this is the minutes from the Parks and Rec Committee meeting.
So are you moving the minutes?
Yes.
Can I get a seconder, please? Councillor Maracus. Councillor Gardner?
I'm sorry, I have to wait for Councillor Humphreys to come to the table.
Well, we cannot wait for...
there's no point me speaking to this if all the interested parties aren't at the table.
I can't help that she's not at the table, Councillor Gardner, so I would appreciate if you would speak, or we'd let other members speak.
I would move the question.
Councillor Abel is asked to call the question. Need a seconder?
Excuse me, that is so rude. I'm asking for courtesy. Yeah, I want a recess.
Hold on one second, Councillor Gardner. Councillor Humphreys. We're waiting for you. She's on her way, Councillor Gardner, if you'd like to begin.
I'll wait till she's at the table.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak to this? Councillor Gardner?
Yes, I'm second.
It's already...
Thank you. I went to the Parks and Recreation Committee meeting last week, and I went specifically because of what was on the agenda. This concerns the back door or the rear door of the Aurora Family Leisure Complex being opened, which was done according to a council motion. The thing that we never discussed or never completely discussed when we did that motion was how are we going to, the motion was to allow people with mobility issues, disability and mobility issues to come in the back door of the family leisure complex through a fob system. But what we didn't discuss was how that was going to look when these people wanted to be able to receive a fob. So the recommendation is that, I'm sorry, I don't think people have it, so I'll just read it. So with respect to eligibility, facility users must demonstrate eligibility for north door access. Eligibility can be demonstrated in two ways. A valid accessible parking permit, which really wasn't what the intent of the motion was, or for people with mobility issues, a note from a physician, chiropractor, registered nurse, practitioner, physiotherapist, etc. The note must state that the facility user has a disability or mobility challenge and requires to use the north entrance. The town of Aurora will not reimburse the cost of obtaining a note. I believe I spoke to it at the time, but the intent of enabling people to use the back door was because they had issues with walking. They had issues with traveling distances. And I hoped that this would be just a basic trust issue where if somebody has an issue, they went to the reception desk and they said, yep, I'm having trouble. Can you please issue me a fob? I think to ask people to go to their doctor and get a doctor's note and then bring that note and have perhaps some personal medical information on record at the reception area is not how I see this happening. So I would like to have feedback from other members of council.
Sorry, what's your question, Councillor Gardner?
I wanted to raise this because I'd like to have feedback from members of council about this.
Thank you, and if council will permit me, the recommendation from the committee will be coming forward to a future council meeting. Is that not correct, or is that this?
This is it.
This is it.
And if I may continue, the thing is that you know, people need to use this door, and we wanted to get this done as quickly as possible, but the committee also wanted to do it the right way. So that's why it's come to council so quickly, because I believe Mr. Downing can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the aquatic classes that engendered the need for this were moved to the SARC, but now they're moving back to the Family Leisure Complex, and I believe they're starting maybe now, this week or next week. So we want to get this door to be accessed as soon as possible. The other thing that was an issue was that it seems that fobs are only going to be issued to pay-as-you-go drop-in ticket holders and not the actual people who are members of the facility who may use the pool. That seems to me to be contradictory. That it should be the people that pay the memberships for the pools that are definitely taken care of with the fob system. And we'd like to accommodate the pay-as-you-go or drop-in ticket holders, but really, they're not the priority here. So anyway, I'd just like feedback from council because I don't think this is respectful to people who are already having issues and just want a little help.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. I have Councillor Abel, Humphreys, and Thompson. Councillor Abel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we received a couple of emails on this from members of our liaison committee. And it really comes down to, in my mind, that council gave direction to allow those with mobility issues and disabilities to access the rear door for the pool. And I think that was what I was in full favor of that, always have been. What it is bleeding, or what it goes into, is that it wants to extend to everyone. And I thought with the discussion, we said, well, if we leave it for everyone, then we have security concerns. And it's just, unique to any facility that you have access at the back door. We talked about cameras and all kinds of things. I really don't understand why people that are coming to a fitness center can't just come through the front door and use a facility like everyone else. If they want to come through, and I heard one expressed interest that he wants to come through the back door so he can change in the pool room and then go to the fitness room, which means he's going to walk down and walk back rather than come in the front door and walk back. So it's not addressing the issue, and the issue is those with mobility issues would like to, when they come to the pool, especially for those that are using it for rehabilitation and for arthritis and several other things, to allow them the comfort of accessing those unoccupied, accessible spots to come in the back door, and I'm all for that. Then I agree totally with Councillor Gardner that a doctor's note and bringing that in to our recreation, there's no privacy. I mean, there's all kinds of exposure there. I don't agree with that at all. I think if anyone comes forward and says to our staff, look, I am having problems and I broke my leg or, you know, this or that, could I have access through the back when I do the swimming? And I get that. I don't think they should have to go and get a doctor's note. I don't think they should have to have their blue card. And they'd be welcome to come in, but I think everyone else, able-bodied, pardon the pun, can go through the front door and access the change rooms just like everyone else does. I don't see any need to extend it beyond that. I believe in the dignity, and I think Councillor Gardner speaks to that, and so I thought we sort of made that clear when we moved this forward, that when this was being done, there was a provision, it wasn't in writing, but if someone had an issue, could they come forward and say, listen, I'm just too old and tired. I just want to come in the back door to my swim class. It really pertains to just that part of our facility. So there's a lot of amendments on this that don't speak to that. Suggestions to implement fob access to the entire facility. I don't understand what that means. Suggestions to the track north door access request for a period of time. I don't understand that either. It's very clear to me that we shouldn't make them bring in a doctor's note. If someone wants to approach our staff and ask the director there, can I have access, please? They should be granted it, no questions asked. So those are sort of my comments, and I thought we more or less said that if that instance came, I thought the director said that, yeah, we would do it that way. And that's not what was presented there. So I share that concern. There's only 30 people that go in that pool. If they all want the fob, they can have it. I mean, it's not a big deal. It's not a big undertaking. I've noticed now just recently that a lot of those swim classes are taking place at the SARC and are not being done at the leisure complex, which is great. So there's not a huge demand and a number of people coming forward to need it. And I do want to make sure that they are extended every bit of dignity and courtesy to move forward. I've been since day one for that notice of motion. For those that want it because they feel entitled or privileged or others, I'm saying just come in the front door like everyone else does at every other facility and leave it at that. And I think that is fair. And I thought that's what we agreed on. So thank you, Councillor Gardner, for bringing that to my attention, that a doctor's note is now being required. I will note that if anyone does go for a blue sticker handicap spot, which is different, but you do have to provide a doctor's note and certification. But we're not saying that that has to be done here for this access. We are a public facility, and we're not government run with all kinds of security and privacy issues that are at risk of being exposed. So, well, Mayor Dawa, if I have to bring in a doctor's note saying I have prostate issues and here's my doctor's note and I can't use it, I don't want that put in a file at the front desk and someone not knowing what it is and can be accessed on our computers here. I don't think that's fair. So that's why I'm saying I don't think a doctor's note is fair unless we have secure ways of making sure that's confidential. And that's not what it's about. We're talking about 10, 15 people that are going to want to access that back door for their therapy pool class. That's all we're talking about. and that we've had that conversation at length. So let's move on with it. If there's other people that want, for whatever convenience, I don't think it's fair for them to prevail upon us for that convenience or entitlement that they're privileged to walk through the back door. Just come in the front door like everyone else does.
Thank you, Councillor Abel. Councillor Humphreys?
To you, Mr. Chair. So this one is just so frustrating. So way back when the whole leisure complex was renovated, we lost access to the back door. There's all kinds of reasons for that. Get rid of the back door service desk, one less resource, everyone come to the front desk. It's all safe and sound, and everybody has to get these bracelets every day to make sure that they're entitled to be in the facility or not. And then during the liaison committee, this was a huge issue. It was the #1 concern of the members in that committee representing the members or people that use the facility. The previous CEO that was here said that he would take that on and do what we needed to take to have access through the back, that north door. Then there was a motion brought forward by Councillor Gardner, and it was explicit in the details, and one of them is just aging population. People are getting a bit older, and they struggle to walk around the building. They just want easier access if they end up coming through the north entrance. So a couple suggestions were made, and it was left to staff to decide if that person qualifies or not. That council meeting, I was very concerned because that is asking staff to make a biased decision, and they have to decide. And that's not what I wanted to put staff in that position. The only way they can do it is get a doctor's note. There's a form they fill out for accessibility issues. It's the same form if you want to get your mail to your house, or if you want your garbage picked up and you're aging, or you've got you can't walk as well, or you have an accident or whatever. That's the only way staff can call it. Otherwise, they have no right to say yes or no to anybody that goes to them. So I was asking staff to come up with a better idea and get that north door opened for anybody who wants to use it. And if it means fob, why not? Fob is not expensive from what I can see. We have it already. And with memberships, you can turn on, turn off. And if you want to buy, fob for, anyways, we're running around in circles. I'm not happy with the current solution that's there. The people at, the committee members at Parks have been very explicit in what their concerns were, and they're asking for staff to go back and look at this again, because the current solution is not working. So what I'd like to ask is the recommendations that are here in this report from the committee, will they be considered by staff if we approve them tonight?
Mr. Clerk, do you have a comment on that?
Thank you. Through Mr. Chair, pardon me, they are just comments of the committee. There is no direction on them. So clearly, I have no doubt that staff will take those comments and council's comments into consideration.
Yeah, no, through you, Mr. Chair, staff can't do anything with this. It is what it is, and I don't believe they can do anything but ask for, we're not going to say, okay, you know what, the only thing we do is provide straight direction that say yes to anyone who asks. That's all we can do. We can't say, oh, you know what, looking at you, no, you look like you can walk, forget it. It's just a really bad situation we put staff in, and I really believe that we have to relook at this whole thing, and if it means putting another motion forward to say the current solution's not working, then so be it. Let's get it done. And I want to understand why we can't go through something better than what's there today. It's not just these members, it's anyone who you talk to. Why can't we use the north door? Unfortunately, we took it away, and that's a problem. So I may have to, through Mr. Chair, through the clerk, what do we need to do to have this relooked at again?
Mr. Clerk?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, council always, well, when we get to council, but a committee can make a recommendation to council that they direct staff to take certain actions. But we would need some clarification about what kind of direction that would be.
Councillor Humphreys?
going to have to think about what I want staff to do. And my personal opinion is go to a full fob system.
Thank you, Councillor Humphreys. Councillor Thompson?
Thank you. Perhaps I can provide a little bit of background. First off, staff were asked to develop a draft procedure. Council didn't really give that much direction to him, so I don't want to beat up on staff too much here. They came forward with what they thought was a procedure, a draft procedure, and really it was brought to the table at the Parks and Rec Committee. Yeah, there were some concerns expressed, and they're not so much recommendations, but they were comments and concerns. They ranged from concerns over, asking people to spend money to get a doctor's note to be able to access the back door to, hey, why don't we make it a benefit of membership to have a fob to access the back door as a means to driving up membership. So they were all comments and ideas around that back door, and since the committee didn't feel comfortable rewriting the policy or the procedure, those comments were forwarded to this council to see whether or not council agreed or disagreed, and then ultimately it's the job of this council to give direction to staff. But let's be clear that there wasn't a lot of direction on the procedure to staff, and they came forward with something, and now we're saying, okay, here's where the issues we have. For myself, the more we've gone around this, the one thing that we've still never been able to identify is how many people are we really talking about? Maybe we should take the opposite approach. Maybe we should just issue fobs. The back door is only accessible by fobs. The people will, I would assume, the software is there, it's not that hard to track anytime they use their fob. And so if you want it, you get it, and then, that addresses the accessibility issue, that addresses the security issue, and in terms of, the revenue piece, because there's been concern about people abusing the system, while it is a little bit of an honor system. But at the same time, you can reconcile the report versus how many tickets they've purchased or whether they have a membership or not versus how many times they've fobbed in and reconcile it. And you know what? If people are abusing the system, then at least we have some data to come back. We've had conversations in the past about, park facilities and amenities, and I think when we were first talking about the skateboard park and concerns were addressed, and they said, well, you get the users of the skateboard park to, address those issues. Let them take ownership of that facility. And when I've talked to them, those kids, I saw them sweeping it out a couple weeks ago so they could use it because they get it, that, it's theirs. And if they don't take responsibility for it, they could lose such a wonderful facility. Same thing in this situation. You let it be known that, hey, fine, you want access, we're going to give you access, but it's a bit on the honor system. You need to make sure that you have valid memberships or tickets, and if not, you ask staff to come back with a report in 6 months' time, and then we can address it to see. But we've gone around and around in this, and it is. I agree with Councillor Humphreys. It puts staff in a difficult process. The question of needing a doctor's note or empowering staff to make the decision was brought up, but the committee also felt that doesn't put staff in a good position to make that judgment call on the spot, because if they make the wrong call, next thing you know, one of us gets a call. And so, maybe the easiest path here, the one with the least resistance, is let's go the opposite way. If they really want to fob, do it, and then we review this in 6 months. Maybe it's only 20 people. Maybe it's only 15 people. But we're spending an awful lot of time on this one. And so I just think that maybe a fresh approach is the better way to go.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Mayor Daw?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was going to ask Mr. Downey how he envisioned this working, but apparently it's not fair. Councillor Thompson brings up a great point, how many people are we talking about? And I think that's a worthwhile discussion. We are putting staff in an unfair position. I was at the Chili's in the Chicago airport 10 years ago, and I ordered a beer with my sandwich, and they asked me for my proof of age. Now, I thought they were being polite, but apparently they weren't. They just asked everybody. There was no exceptions, because obviously someone had made a wrong decision at some point. So their policy was, you just asked everybody, it doesn't matter who. That takes the onus off the staff. I think that's what we have to understand, is we cannot put staff in a position where they're making decisions. I see nothing wrong with asking for a doctor's note. Now, it's been quite a while since I've had a doctor's note, but I don't think they put any details on there other than Jeffrey Daw is eligible for special entry, or whatever the phrasing would be. I don't think they put any kind of details on there at all. I think I can't imagine them putting anything like that on there. Yeah, so, I mean, we don't do that. If we have to be consistent, we have to understand, first of all, go back to the original design of this building. That door was going to be closed. This is nothing new. That was a decision that council made, I don't know, seems like forever ago, Mr. Downey. I don't think it was that long. But that's a decision that we made. So why don't we just try sticking with the decision for a while and see whether or not it works? How many people are truly an issue? Why don't we, ask Mr. Downey maybe to come up with a different idea, so maybe try and get an idea of how many people are using it. And maybe it is 20, maybe it's 120. I don't know. Let's see if we can get that information.